My name is Relvanto. Yes. I know it sounds like a detergent brand on some backwater moon. Save your chuckles. I'm a third-tier records aide at Vesper Crest Academy, which is the kind of place that turns promising cadets into legends or into memorial plaques with tasteful light. I don't fight. I don't fly. I don't do heroic stunts while inspirational music swells. I watch, and I write down what everyone later pretends they totally saw coming. So when I tell you the day a human girl arrived, and our gate bully tried to turn her into a public lesson and an instructor apologized to her seconds later, I'm not exaggerating. I'm underselling it, if anything. Because if I told you what it felt like in the air, the way every antenna and nerve in the courtyard screamed at once, you'd call me dramatic. Which, fine. I am dramatic, but I'm also right. Vesper Crest Academy sits on a cliff of engineered stone above a sea of cloud, a floating citadel pinned to a planet that exists mostly to look expensive. The front gate is not just a gate, it's a statement. 2 black alloy pillars, a luminous crest that shifts colors depending on rank recognition, and enough sensors to count your heartbeat, your hormone levels, and your last 3 bad decisions. The courtyard beyond it is where reputations are born, where first days get measured and silently categorized by predators wearing uniforms and smiling like professionals. That morning the air was sharp, cold enough to sting gill slits, warm enough for the furred species to stop whining. Cadets gathered in clumps, pretending not to stare at each other, failing in the usual spectacular way. I was stationed at the records kiosk, a modest booth with a glass screen and a stack of entry slates, because the academy trusts me with paperwork and trusts nobody with anything else. I was mid-sip of cafeteria bitter brew when the crowd shifted. It wasn't loud. It was instinctive, like a school of fish feeling a shadow pass overhead. Heads turned, spines straightened, conversations thinned, and there she was, a human, female, young, smaller than most of the bruisers Vesper Crest liked to collect. Not wearing ceremonial anything. No cape, no dramatic escort. Just a fitted travel jacket, a small pack, and a face that looked like it had already seen enough nonsense to last 3 lifetimes. Her hair was dark, tied back. Her eyes did that human thing, the focused stare that makes it feel like they're measuring your skeleton for a display case. She walked like she belonged there, which in our courtyard was either confidence or a medical condition. Someone near me whispered, "That's the Terran." Someone else replied, "They actually sent one." I thought it was a rumor. A third voice full of shaky pride said, "My cousin served near Terran space. He said never insult their food." That one made no sense. But people say comforting things when nervous. The human stopped at the threshold line, right before the gate sensors. She glanced up at the crest, then down at the slate in her hand. She didn't look around like a lost hatchling. She looked around like she was checking for the nearest exit in case we were all idiots. Which, again, then a shadow leaned into her path. Dax Vorn. If you've never seen Dax, imagine someone took a boulder, taught it to sneer, and dressed it in a cadet uniform 2 sizes too small purely to offend the fabric. He was a Korek, heavy-boned, thick-necked, with plated ridges along his brow that made him look permanently disappointed in the universe. He was also, and I say this with professional neutrality, an absolute menace. Dax had made a hobby of blocking the gate for first years. Not officially, of course. Officially he was maintaining tradition. Unofficially he enjoyed watching confidence evaporate. He stepped in front of the human, and planted himself like the gate had grown muscles. The courtyard got quiet in that special way where everyone pretends it's normal and nobody is staring, while their eyes are basically glued to the scene. Dax looked down at her. He made it theatrical. He took his time, like he was reading the label on a questionable piece of meat. "Well," he rumbled, loud enough to reach the far benches, "the academy is truly lowering its standards." A few cadets snorted. Nervous laughs, the kind that say, "Please don't notice I'm alive." The human tilted her head. That was it. Just, hi. No bow. No flinch. No attempt to explain her existence. Dax blinked once as if his brain had expected fear and received a pebble instead. He leaned closer. "You don't belong here." The human smiled, and it was small, polite, and somehow worse than any insult. "Okay." Another blink from Dax. He lifted a thick finger and jabbed it toward the crest above the gate. "This place trains real soldiers, real pilots, real combat leaders. Not tourist mascots from the soft worlds." I heard a cadet behind me mutter, "Terrans aren't soft." Someone else answered, "Shut up, he'll hear you." Oh. He heard everything. Bullies always do. Dax spread his arms wide. "You want inside? You earn it. Tradition. You show respect." The human glanced past him at the gate like she was considering walking around. Then she looked back at his face. What kind of respect, she asked. Dax's mouth curled. Kneel. Ask permission. I felt my stomach knot. Not because I cared about the human's pride. Pride is abundant. It grows on academy walls like mold. I felt it because of what came next. If she refused, Dax Vorn didn't accept refusal. He accepted submission or he accepted violence, and he made sure both were public. The human's eyes moved over him again. Slow. Not afraid. Curious. Like he was a problem in a textbook and she was deciding the shortest solution. She exhaled. No. It wasn't loud, but it landed. Dax's ridges flared. No, no, she repeated. Like she just confirmed the weather. A ripple ran through the crowd. I saw wings twitch. I saw tails stiffen. Even the confident cadets leaned forward a fraction. Because whatever happened next would become currency. Dax's voice lowered. You're new here, Terran. You don't know how this works. The human nodded once. True. Dax stepped closer. Then let me teach you. He raised his hand, not a fist yet, but the intention was visible like a blade half drawn. And that's when I saw the instructor. Instructor Mako Jin. Yes. I know you told me not to reuse certain names often. Relax. This is not that name. This is Mako. Short. Easy. And he looked like a walking caution sign. Mako was a ram, tall and wire-lean, with narrow eyes and a scar that split his upper lip. He'd been a frontline operator before he became an instructor, which meant he had that calm, tired look of someone who has survived enough explosions to stop finding them interesting. He was crossing the courtyard toward the gate. Fast, but not fast enough. Dax's hand swung down, and the human moved. I have seen quick. I've seen drill champions. I've seen duelists. I've seen a Zori cadet snatch a thrown blade out of midair and smile about it. This was different. The human didn't dodge like prey. She didn't scramble. She didn't panic. She shifted her weight like she was stepping onto a familiar stair. Dax's hand missed, slicing air, because the target wasn't there anymore. The human's shoulder dipped. Her foot placed behind his. Her hand touched his wrist. Touched. Not grabbed. Not clamped. Just guided. Then Dax Vorn, the gate boulder, the pride of Korok brutes, the terror of first years, pitched sideways, not slammed, not launched, pitched. Like a tower that suddenly realized its foundation was imaginary. He hit the ground with a sound that made half the courtyard flinch. The human stepped back and raised both palms, open, peaceful. Like she just prevented a spilled drink. Dax lay there for one stunned second, then exploded into motion, roaring, trying to rise. The human didn't retreat. She just said calmly, "Are we done?" That should not have been funny. It was funny. I made a sound that might have been a laugh, and I immediately coughed to disguise it because my survival instinct is excellent. Dax surged up, eyes wide with pure humiliation. He looked like he'd been slapped by the concept of physics. You tripped me." The human nodded. "Yes, you think you can embarrass me in front of everyone?" The human looked around at the silent courtyard, then back at him. "You picked the location." That was when Instructor Mako arrived. He grabbed Dax by the shoulder and yanked him back so hard the larger cadet stumbled. "Enough!" Mako snapped. Dax pointed, sputtering. "Instructor, she attacked me." Mako's gaze flicked to the human. Quick. Assessing. He took in her stance, her breathing, the way her hands were open but her feet were placed for balance. Then he looked at Dax, then at the crowd. His jaw tightened. "You blocked the gate again," Mako said. Dax tried to stand taller. "Tradition, Instructor." Mako's voice went cold. "Tradition is not assault." Dax's ridges flared with outrage. "She disrespected me." The human raised a finger slightly, polite like she was asking to speak in a meeting. "I said hi." A few cadets made choking sounds. Someone behind me whispered. She said hi. Mako turned his head toward her. His expression shifted from anger to something else. Not admiration. Not fear. Recognition. Like he'd heard a story and now the story had walked into his courtyard wearing a travel jacket. He took one step closer to the human. His voice lowered. Controlled. "Nay." The human lifted her slate. Rena Vale. Simple. Clean. Not a war title. Not a ceremonial chain of syllables. Just Rena. Mako nodded once. Then he surprised everyone by doing something instructors never do at the gate. He stopped being a statue. He moved like a person. He inhaled. He looked her in the eye. He said, clearly in front of the entire academy entrance, "I owe you an apology." The courtyard froze so hard I swear the air thickened. Dax's mouth fell open. Rena blinked. For what? Mako's jaw flexed. For allowing this to happen in my perimeter, Dax barked. Instructor. Mako didn't even glance at him. That was the terrifying part. Dax Vorn, the courtyard bully, had become irrelevant. Mako kept his eyes on Rena. You should have been met properly, not tested by a cadet with an ego problem. Rena's eyebrows rose. That's nice of you. It's necessary, Mako said. Sharp. This academy is not a playground for peacocks. Then he turned his head slightly, addressing the gathered cadets without fully breaking eye contact with her. Listen carefully, he said. The Terran cadet is under my direct intake. Any interference will be treated as insubordination. A murmur surged through the crowd. Direct intake was rare. It meant the instructor had taken personal responsibility. It meant the academy cared enough to protect you, or control you. Often both. Dax was purple with rage. You can't do that. Mako finally looked at Dax, and when he did, Dax shrank. Just a fraction. I can, Mako said. And I will. Then, in what felt like the final humiliation, Mako pointed to the ground. Apologize, he told Dax. The courtyard collectively held its breath. Dax's eyes bulged. To her? Yes, Mako said. Dax's hands clenched. His teeth bared. He looked like he might explode, or attack, or do something reckless, and then he did the thing I never thought I'd see. He lowered his head, just enough to count. I apologize, he ground out. Rena's face stayed neutral. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She just nodded, like she'd accepted a package delivery. Okay, she said, and the gate sensors chimed, recognizing her slate. The crest above shifted to a bright, welcoming tone. Rena stepped forward. Dax stood there trembling with rage, but Maiko's hand stayed on his shoulder, heavy as a restrained collar. Rena crossed the threshold. She was inside, and I realized something that made my fingers go cold around my slate. Instructor Maiko Jin did not apologize because she tripped a bully. He apologized because he knew exactly what she was. Not just a human, not just a cadet, something else. Something the academy had been waiting for, or fearing, or both. Mako walked beside her toward the inner courtyard. I watched them pass my records kiosk, close enough for me to see the details. Rena's hands had faint marks on the knuckles. Not fresh bruises. Old. Repeated. The kind you get from training, not accident. Her breathing was steady. Her eyes scanned the academy grounds with a calm that felt practiced. Miko spoke quietly to her. But I caught fragments. You were delayed. Docking bay line was slow. You were not supposed to enter through the public gate. I like walking. Mako made a sound that might have been a sigh. Of course you do. They approached the inner yard, where the first years would be assigned to squads and quarters, where the real social sorting would begin. The crowd started to break apart, buzzing with gossip. I heard someone say he apologized to her. Another voice. He made Dax apologize. A third. She dropped him with one move. Someone behind me, with the soft voice of a scholar species, whispered. That wasn't a move. That was a lesson. I tried to return to my work. I truly did. But curiosity is a disease, and I am chronically ill. So I did what any sensible records aide would do. I followed, not openly, and not suicidal. I drifted along the edge, clipboard in hand, looking like I belonged. Nobody questions a person holding paperwork. Paperwork is invisible armor. Inside the inner courtyard, the intake officers were lined up, each with their squads. Cadets stood in rows, some trying to look fierce, some trying not to faint, some already choosing targets with their eyes. Rena and Miko stepped into the center lane. Conversations died again. The intake officer in charge, Captain Silex Rowe, strode forward. Captain Rowe was a veil in all sleek muscles and polished authority. With a voice that could slice metal, his gaze landed on Rena. He measured her like a weapon shipment. Terran cadet, Rowe said. You are late. Rena held up her slate. I arrived on schedule. The gate had a situation. Rowe's eyes flicked to Miko. Mako's expression tightened. Handled? Rowe stared at Rena again. You will address your superiors with proper form. Rena nodded. Yes, Captain. Then she added, in the same calm tone, what's the proper form here? Every world does it differently. Rowe's nostrils flared slightly. You will learn. Rena smiled. Small. Polite. That same expression that said, I'm listening, but I'm also aware you might be silly. Rowe turned to the assembled cadets. His voice rose. Vesper Crest is not kind, he declared. It is not gentle. It does not care about your pride, your lineage, your excuses. It cares about results. You will be tested until you either adapt or you leave. Rena's eyes stayed forward. Ro paced. Some of you believe you are predators. Some of you believe you are unbreakable. Some of you believe this academy exists to polish your greatness. He stopped pacing and pointed toward the training domes. Visible beyond the yard, sleek black structures that looked harmless until you remembered what happened inside them. It exists to remove your illusions. Cadets shifted. Swallowed. Ro's gaze swept them. Then he said the thing that made my stomach drop. Today's intake includes an experimental placement. A collective murmur. Ro continued. A cross-species performance trial. Lev evaluation. No pre-adjustment. That was not standard. That was dangerous. My eyes snapped to Meko. His shoulders stiffened. Rena's head tilted a fraction. Interested. Ro's voice sharpened. Cadet Rena Vale will participate. The courtyard reacted like it had been struck. Some cadets looked thrilled. Some looked offended. A few looked scared in a way they tried to hide. I felt my mouth go dry. An experimental trial on day one? With no pre-adjustments? That meant one of two things. Either the academy wanted to show off the human, or it wanted to break her in public. Rena didn't flinch. She just asked, "What's the trial?" Ro's lips thinned. "You will find out in the dome." Mako stepped forward, voice low but firm. "Captain, this is not what was authorized." Ro's eyes snapped to him. "Instructor, do you question command?" Mako's jaw flexed. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Ro turned back to Rena. "You will proceed." Rena nodded. "Okay." That single word again. "Okay." Like she was agreeing to a classroom quiz, not a high-risk evaluation designed to make a point. Ro gestured to two cadet escorts. Both tall, both armed with practice staves. "Escort her," he ordered. The two cadets stepped forward, clearly trying to look tough. One of them, a lean avian named Kez, gave Rena a sharp, evaluating look. The other, a horned brute named Bram, smirked like he'd already decided she was entertainment. Rena looked at them both. "Lead the way." They walked toward Dome 3, the one with the reinforced doors and the warning lights that always made first-years suddenly remember their religion. I followed at a careful distance, still pretending to be busy with a clipboard. Mako walked behind them, his eyes locked on Rena like he was trying to predict an explosion before it happened. As they reached the dome entrance, I saw Dax Vorn again. Course he was there. Bullies appear wherever humiliation can be repaid. He stood near the side gate with a cluster of his friends, jaw tight, eyes burning. When Rena passed him, Dax leaned forward and hissed, "This isn't over." Rena didn't even slow. She glanced at him, expression neutral, and said, "I hope it is. I'm busy today." Busy? Yes, busy walking into an experimental trial that smelled like a trap. The dome doors hissed open. Cold air spilled out, carrying the scent of metal and sterilized sweat. Rena stepped inside. Mako followed. The doors began to close, and right before they sealed, I heard Captain Ro say quietly, to someone beside him, "If the human is real, she'll adapt. If she isn't, we stop wasting resources." My grip tightened on my clipboard so hard the edge bit into my palm, because that sentence told me everything. This wasn't a welcome. This was a verdict in progress. And inside Dome 3, the Academy was about to find out what a human girl really does when you treat her like a test subject. The doors sealed with a heavy clang. The lights above the dome entrance shifted from neutral white to alert amber, and every cadet in the corridor leaned closer, hungry for the outcome. So did I, because I had a terrible feeling the apology at the gate was the smallest shock we were going to witness today. And if I was right, someone was about to beg for forgiveness again, not because it was polite, because it would be the only smart option left. The moment Dome 3 sealed, the corridor changed, not physically. The walls stayed the same. The lights stayed amber. The air still smelled like disinfectant and ambition, but the mood shifted into that sharp, electric silence you get when a crowd realizes it might be about to witness something it will brag about forever, or deny forever. I pressed myself against a support pillar with my clipboard held up like I had official business. Nobody questioned me. Nobody ever questions a being holding paperwork with a stressed expression. It's the universal symbol for leave me alone. Through the dome's observation glass we could see the interior training floor. A wide circular chamber, reinforced plating, marked lanes, a dozen ceiling emitters that could simulate weather, gravity, pressure changes, and various ways to make your day worse. Captain Silex Rose stood at the control platform with two tech officers. Instructor Miko was down on the floor, walking with Rena Vale toward the center ring. Rena's posture was relaxed, not lazy. Relaxed. Like she was waiting for someone to finish talking so she could get on with the important part. Mako stopped her at the ring edge and spoke quietly. I couldn't hear most of it, but his body language screamed caution. Rena nodded once, twice. Then she said something that made Mako's mouth tighten. I leaned forward, straining to read lips. Human lips are easier than most. Rena's mouth formed the words. It's fine. Mako didn't look convinced. Captain Rowe's voice boomed through the dome speakers. Cadet Rena Vale. This is a live evaluation. Rena looked up at the speakers. Cool. A few cadets outside the glass snickered, nervously, like laughter could protect them from whatever leave evaluation meant. Rowe continued. The purpose is to assess adaptability under stress. Rena's face stayed neutral. Okay. Rowe's eyes narrowed. You will not speak unless addressed. Rena blinked. Then, very politely she said, Yes, Captain. Mako's gaze flicked to the platform. He didn't like this. That was obvious. Rowe gestured to the tech officer. Begin. Level 1. A tone chimed. The dome floor lights shifted. The air inside thickened slightly. Gravity increased. Not much. Enough to make a few species adjust their stance. Enough to make someone with weak joints start praying. Rena didn't move at all. She didn't sway. She didn't stumble. She didn't even look mildly inconvenienced. She just rolled her shoulders once, like she'd noticed the weight. Captain Rowe watched her. Then he said, Level 2. Gravity increased again. Kez, the avian cadet escort, was watching from the inside perimeter. His feather ridge ruffled. Bram's horns tilted forward. Caution. Mako's eyes stayed on Rena like he was trying to spot the exact moment she would crack. Rena? Still fine. She shifted her feet half a step, tested her balance, then looked up at the speakers. Is this it? She asked. A ripple of sound went through the watchers outside. Captain Rowe's jaw tightened. Level 3, he said. The floor hummed. The gravitational field deepened. Now it was serious. A few cadets outside the glass pressed their hands against the wall like they could feel it through the barrier. I've seen cadets vomit at level 3. Rena's knees bent a fraction. Her expression changed slightly. Not fear, not pain. Annoyance, like someone had turned the music down during her favorite part. She exhaled slowly through her nose, then straightened. Mako took a step closer, ready to catch her if she fell. She didn't. She looked at him and said softly, I'm okay. Mako muttered something back. His lips formed. Don't be stubborn. Rena's mouth curved. Too late. Captain Rowe's voice cut in. Cadet Vale, execute standard combat stance. Rena paused. Which standard? Rowe's eyes narrowed further. The Academy standard. Rena lifted her hands, then hesitated. I haven't learned your standard yet. That sounded reasonable, almost respectful. Captain Rowe did not care about reasonable. He snapped. Then use your own. Rena nodded. Gladly. She lowered her center of gravity. Feet planted. Hands up. Shoulders relaxed. Head slightly angled. It didn't look like the Academy's elegant, rigid stances. It looked practical, like she expected a real fight, not a parade. Instructor Mako's eyes sharpened. Captain Rowe leaned forward on the platform. Bring in the sparring unit. The tech officer hesitated. Captain, at this gravity level, do it, Rowe said. A panel in the floor opened, and up rose a training drone, a compact combat unit. Matte gray with 2 articulated arms ending in padded striking surfaces. Nothing lethal. Nothing that could kill you, but enough to injure you if you underestimated it. The drone's optics locked onto Rena. It lunged, fast. Rena moved. Not a leap. Not a dramatic flip like the holofilms loved to sell. A simple step. A pivot. A slight turn of her hip. The drone's strike missed by the width of my thumb. Then Rena's hand snapped out and slapped the drone's arm sideways. The drone's balance shifted. She used that shift, like it was a handle. With one clean motion she turned, hooked her leg behind its base and shoved. The drone toppled. It hit the floor with a heavy clang, and the corridor outside erupted into noise. What? She dropped it. At level 3, Bram's mouth hung open. Kez's feathers flared. Captain Rowe's eyes flicked to the tech officer. Reset. Attack pattern 2. The drone jerked back to life. Its arms reoriented. Its posture changed. Pattern 2 was brutal. Quick strikes. No pauses. Designed to overwhelm. The drone attacked again. Rena didn't backpedal. She moved forward. That was the wrong direction. That was what predators do. She slipped inside the drone's strike range where its arms couldn't fully swing without hitting itself. Then she hammered the side of its chassis with her palm, not hard enough to shatter it, hard enough to disrupt its balance and timing. The drone's arm twitched. Rena grabbed it, turned it, and forced it into a lock that made the unit's joints squeal. Then she looked up toward the observation glass, like she was aware of all of us staring, and said, "Clearly, is the drone allowed to tap out?" I made a strangled noise that I immediately swallowed. Laughter bubbled through the corridor. Sharp, surprised. Even some of the older cadets cracked. Captain Rowe did not laugh. "Level 4, he said. Maiko's head snapped up. Captain Rowe ignored him. The dome floor vibrated as gravity increased again. Now it was heavy enough to make a strong cadet feel like they were running through mud while wearing armor made of regret. Rena's shoulders dipped. Her jaw clenched. Sweat beaded at her temple, but she stayed standing. The drone attacked again. This time its strike clipped her forearm. Rena grimaced. Not from pain. Exactly. More like irritation that something dared touch her. She didn't retreat. She grabbed the drone's arm, yanked it toward her, stepped to the side, and drove her elbow into the unit's joint housing. The drone's arm went limp. Its optics flickered. It staggered. Rena shoved it down and planted her foot on its chassis. Then she looked up toward the platform. "Captain," she said, voice steady, "are you trying to see if I can adapt, or are you trying to embarrass me?" The corridor went silent again. Captain Rowe's lips tightened into a line so thin it could cut. "You will not question command," Rowe hissed. Rena nodded. "Then don't make it obvious." Instructor Mako inhaled sharply. I swear I felt the air outside the dome shift from excitement to danger. Captain Rowe's eyes were hard. "Cadet Vale, you will face a peer opponent." I blinked. A peer opponent at level 4 gravity. That wasn't evaluation. That was cruelty wearing an official badge. Mako's voice cut across the dome speakers. "Captain, that's not protocol." Rowe turned slightly, eyes cold. "Protocol is whatever I say it is in my training dome." Mako's fists clenched. He looked like he wanted to climb the platform and throw the captain off it. Rena, meanwhile, lifted her foot off the disabled drone and rolled her wrist like she was warming up. "Peer opponent?" she asked. Rowe's gaze flicked to the side. "Cadet Dax Vorn, enter." The corridor gasped. Dax, of course. Of course the captain chose Dax. The bully. The gate boulder. The one who needed revenge like he needed oxygen. The side entry hatch opened. Dax stepped in. He wore a training harness, now padded but tight. His ridges were flared. His eyes were bright with that hungry satisfaction bullies get when they think the rules have finally moved in their favor. He looked at Rena. He smiled. "Oh," he rumbled, voice carrying through the dome. "This is perfect." Rena stared at him for a moment, then sighed. "You again," she said, like he was a bad song stuck in her head. Dax spread his arms. "No instructor to save you now." Rena tilted her head. "Was anyone saving me earlier?" A few cadets outside choked on laughter. Dax's smile twitched. He stepped forward, heavy in the increased gravity but still powerful. Captain Rowe's voice thundered. "Spar begins. First incapacitation wins." Miko's voice snapped, loud and sharp. "No lethal strikes. Do you understand?" Dax didn't answer. Rena did. "Yes, instructor." That was when I noticed something terrifying. Rena was being polite. Dax was not. The spar tone chimed. Dax lunged. He came in hard, swinging wide, using brute force. His goal wasn't technique. His goal was to crush. Rena moved. She sidestepped, light despite the gravity, and Dax's fist hit air. He swung again. Rena ducked. He swung again. Rena stepped inside his range and tapped his chest with 2 fingers. Just a tap. Dax froze for half a heartbeat, confused. Then he felt it. Rena had struck a nerve cluster. Not enough to injure permanently. Enough to disrupt muscle response. Dax's arm jerked wrong. He snarled and swung with the other arm. Rena caught the wrist. Her grip looked small against his thick limb, but her stance was perfect. She turned her hips and pulled. Dax stumbled forward. Rena pivoted and swept his leg again, the same move as at the gate, but heavier, sharper. Adapted to the increased gravity, Dax went down, hard. The corridor outside erupted. "No way." Again. He fell again. Dax roared as he hit the floor, scrambling to rise. Humiliated in front of everyone. Again. Rena stepped back, hands up. "Calm. Stop trying to punch the air," she told him. "It's not your enemy." Dax surged to his feet. His ridges flared so wide they looked like they might detach. He charged. This time he got his hands on her shoulders. He squeezed, trying to crush her down. Rena's knees bent under the pressure. Her teeth clenched. For the first time she looked strained. The crowd outside the dome leaned in like starving animals. Dax snarled, breath hot. Now who's laughing? Rena's eyes locked onto his, and then she smiled. Not polite, not small, sharp. Me, she said. Then she did something that made my brain stutter. She stepped forward, into his grip. She pushed her forehead into his chest plating, and she drove her foot into his knee joint, not with a kick, but with a stomp timed perfectly with a shift of her weight. Dax's knee buckled. He howled and loosened his grip for a fraction of a second. That fraction was enough. Rena twisted, slipped out, grabbed his arm and used his own momentum like a lever. She turned. She dropped her center of gravity, and she threw him, a full-bodied Korak cadet, thrown. At level 4 gravity, Dax hit the floor so hard the dome plates rattled. He lay there, stunned, breath knocked out. Rena stood over him, chest heaving, sweat on her brow. She didn't raise a fist. She didn't taunt him. She looked up toward the platform and said, "Is that incapacitated enough?" Silence. Captain Rowe stared down, face unreadable. Instructor Mako's shoulders eased just slightly, like he'd been holding his breath for the last 30 seconds of his life. Dax groaned and tried to rise. Rena held out a hand, not as a trap, as an offer. Dax looked at the hand like it was venom. He slapped it away and forced himself up, wobbling. Rena shrugged. "Suit yourself." Captain Rowe's voice snapped through the speakers. "Match ends." Cadet Vale. The corridor outside erupted into a roar. Even the ones who hated humans couldn't pretend that wasn't impressive. Even the ones who wanted her to fail looked rattled. Captain Rowe raised a hand. The noise slowly fell. "Cadet Vale," he said cold. "You will explain what you just did." Rena blinked. "I won." Rowe's eyes narrowed. "Explain your technique." Rena looked at Dax, then at the drone, then back up. "I didn't use one technique," she said. "I used whatever worked." Rowe's jaw flexed. "That is not an answer." Rena's voice stayed steady. "It is. You just don't like it." Somewhere behind me someone whispered, "She's going to get punished." They were right, because Captain Rowe was not the kind of leader who tolerated being spoken to like an equal. Rowe's voice dropped. "Cadet Vale, level 5. Mako's head snapped up again. "Captain." Rowe's eyes flashed. "Silence, Instructor." The tech officer hesitated, hands hovering over the controls like they were afraid the console might bite. Bruce stared at the officer. "Do it." Gravity increased. Level 5. The air inside the dome became thick, heavy. Even watching through glass I felt it in my bones, like the dome itself was pressing down on the world. Rena's knees bent. This time she couldn't hide the strain. Her shoulders trembled. Her breathing sharpened. Dax, already shaken, dropped to one knee immediately, cursing. The drone, still half disabled, didn't move at all. Mako stepped toward Rena, voice urgent. "That's enough. You've proven adaptability." Rowe's voice cut him off. "This is not about proving. This is about truth." Rena lifted her head slowly. Sweat dripped from her brow. Her eyes stayed clear. "Truth?" she repeated. Rowe leaned forward, voice cruelly calm. "Humans are myths dressed as allies. Some say you are built for war. Some say you are lucky animals with loud stories. Which is it, Cadet Vale?" Rena stared up at the platform. Her jaw tightened. Then she laughed. Not a happy laugh. Not a friendly laugh. A short, sharp laugh that said, "You really chose this moment to be arrogant." She took a slow breath and her voice came out rough but controlled. "Captain," she said, "you're asking the wrong question." Rowe's eyes narrowed. "Then tell me the right one." Rena's hands flexed. "The right question is, how many times do you plan to push before you remember I'm not here to impress you?" The corridor outside went dead silent. Instructor Mako looked like he might tear his own hair out. Captain Rowe's face turned hard. "You will not." A new voice interrupted. Quiet, but it carried. "Captain Rowe. End the trial." Every head turned. Director Halden Quill. "If you've never met a director of Vesper Crest Academy, let me save you the trouble. They don't walk like normal beings. They glide. Like gravity is a suggestion they politely ignore." Halden Quill was tall, pale-skinned, with silver hair cut short and eyes like polished stone. Not warm, not cruel either, just exact. He stood at the top of the observation platform stairs, hands behind his back, expression calm. Captain Rowe stiffened. Director Quill didn't look at him. He looked at Rena, then he looked at Instructor Mako. Then he looked at Dax Forn kneeling and panting like his pride had been run over. Finally, Quill spoke again. "End the trial," he repeated. Rowe's jaw flexed. "Director, the evaluation." Quill's gaze snapped to him. It wasn't loud. It was worse. It was the gaze of a being who can erase your career with a sentence and not lose sleep over it. Rose swallowed. Yes, Director. He nodded at the tech officer. Gravity dropped, not all at once. Gradually. Level 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to normal. As the pressure eased, Rena straightened slowly. Rolling her shoulders, she took a long breath. Her eyes flicked to Micah. I'm good, she murmured. Mako's expression was tight, but his eyes held relief. Director Quill leaned toward the mic. Cadet Rena Vale, he said. You will exit the dome. Rena looked up. Okay. She walked toward the exit, steps steady like the gravity trial had been annoying but not defining. As the hatch opened and she stepped out, the corridor parted instinctively. Cadets stared at her like she was a weapon that had just learned to speak. Rena glanced around, then smiled faintly. You guys always watch people like this? She asked. Nobody answered. Because what do you say to the person who just tossed the bully twice and stood under level 5 gravity like it was a bad workout? Rena walked past them and stopped when she saw me. Me, the records A, the clipboard goblin. Her eyes flicked to the slates in my hands. You work intake? She asked. I swallowed. Records cadet. She nodded, then leaned slightly closer. Just so you know, she said quietly. If anyone else blocks the gate tomorrow, I'm going to be late again. Then she walked on. I stood there frozen, because that was a joke, but it was also a warning. Instructor Mako guided her toward the administrative wing, away from the staring masses. Director Quill remained on the platform staring after her like he was studying an equation. Captain Rose stepped toward him, voice low. Director, she challenged authority. Quill's eyes stayed on the corridor where Rena had disappeared. She challenged foolishness, Quill corrected. Russ stiffened. The Academy cannot allow. Quill finally turned to him. Captain, you apologized to her at the gate. Ro blinked. I did not. Quill's gaze sharpened. Instructor Miko did. Mako's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. Quill nodded once. Good. Ro's mouth opened. Director. Quill lifted a hand. Captain Ro. You were seconds away from turning a diplomatic placement into an incident. Ro's face flushed. She can handle it. Quill's voice turned cold. That is not the point. Ro hesitated. Then what is the point? Quill's eyes narrowed, and the air around him seemed to sharpen. The point, Quill said, is that the Terran Coalition did not send us a child to entertain your ego. Ro swallowed. Quill continued. They sent us a message. Mako's eyes flicked to Quill. Director. What message? Quill didn't answer immediately. He walked to the observation glass and looked down at the training floor, where the drone still lay partially disabled, and Dax Forn was being escorted out, limping with rage. Then Quill spoke. Quiet. Controlled. The Coalition's border patrol intercepted a fleet 6 cycles ago, he said. Unmarked, heavily armed. Not Imperium. Not pirate. Unknown. Ro's eyes widened slightly. Unknown? Quill nodded. They did not attack. They watched. They mapped. They tested response times. Mako's expression darkened. Scouts. Quill's gaze stayed distant. Yes. And the Coalition suspects those scouts were here for one reason. Ro's voice was tight. Earth. Quill's eyes flicked to him. Not just Earth. Any world that produces fighters who can adapt faster than doctrine. The corridor felt colder. I was still nearby, pretending to check slates. Listening because I value my curiosity more than my safety. Quill continued. The Coalition believes we will face contact soon. Not friendly. Not slow. And the first battles will not be won by tradition. Mako's jaw clenched. They'll be won by adaptability. Quill nodded. Correct. Ro's voice was low. And they sent her. Quill's eyes narrowed. They sent her to see if we are worth fighting beside. The silence after that sentence was heavy. Because it wasn't about whether Rena Vale could survive the Academy. It was about whether the Academy could survive her. And whether we deserved her. Captain Ro swallowed. Director, what are your orders? Quill turned. Expression unreadable. You will formally apologize to Cadet Vale, he said. Ro stiffened. Director, Quill's gaze snapped. You will apologize. You will state clearly that the trial exceeded acceptable limits. You will place it on record. You will also assign her to Instructor Moko's unit. Ro's eyes widened. My trial. Quill's voice sharpened. Your trial was a tantrum dressed as evaluation. Ro's face went pale. Quill continued. And Captain, if you ever push a cadet to level 5 out of pride again, I will personally escort you off this station. Ro swallowed stiff. Yes, Director. Quill turned to Mako. Instructor, keep her alive. Mako's mouth tightened. Yes, Director. Quill's gaze softened slightly. Not kind. Just less sharp. And instructor, he added. Teach her our doctrine, but do not try to change her. Meko's eyes flicked toward the corridor where Rena vanished. Understood. Quill nodded, then walked away, leaving Captain Rose standing there like a statue that had been cracked. I exhaled slowly, because now I knew why Mako apologized at the gate so fast. He wasn't apologizing to protect a new cadet's feelings. He was apologizing because he recognized a situation that could become a disaster. A Terran placed under pressure would not simply fail. A Terran placed under pressure might respond. And if she responded the wrong way, our academy would be the first casualty. Later that day, the rumor storm hit like a tidal wave. Some cadets said Rena was enhanced. Others said she was naturally built denser due to Earth gravity. Some insisted she had hidden tech in her boots. One idiot claimed she had psychic powers. I knew the truth was simpler. She had trained in a world that didn't care about her pride either. And she had learned something the academy was slow to accept. Rules are useful until they become shackles. I saw her again that evening in the mess hall. She sat alone at a corner table, eating like she'd been starving because apparently Terrans treat food like fuel instead of a social ritual. 2 cadets approached her, not Dax. He was likely nursing his ego in a dark storage closet. These were quieter, smarter. Kez the avian and a slim amphibian named Leo. They stood awkwardly at her table. Rena glanced up mid-bite. Hey, Kez cleared his throat. We wanted to ask something. Rena chewed, swallowed, then gestured at the bench. Sit if you want. They sat, tense. Leo's eyes flicked around. You really did that under level 5. Rena shrugged. It wasn't fun. Kez leaned forward. Why didn't you collapse? Rena stared at him like he'd asked why she didn't melt. Because collapsing doesn't solve the problem, she said. Leo blinked. That's it? Rena nodded. That's it. Kez hesitated. Back home, do you train like this? Rena laughed softly. No. Back home we train worse. With less supervision. And more yelling. Leo made a nervous sound. Why? Rena leaned back, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Because, she said slowly, we learned a long time ago that if you wait for the universe to be fair, you'll die waiting. Kez's feathers ruffled. Leo swallowed. Are you here because of the unknown fleet? Rena's gaze sharpened immediately. The air at the table changed. You heard about that? She said quietly. Kez looked away. Rumors. Rena tapped her fingers on the table. Yeah. Rumor. Leo whispered. Is it real? Rena stared at them both. Then she sighed. Look, she said voice low, I'm not supposed to talk about it. So I won't. Kez nodded quickly. Right. Of course. Rena's mouth curved faintly. But, she added, if a director tells you to train harder, maybe do it. Kez and Leo went still. Rena took another bite. Casual again. Kez stood slowly. Thank you. Rena waved with her fork. Sure. They walked away like their minds had been rearranged. And I sat at my own table across the hall pretending I wasn't watching, pretending my heart wasn't pounding. Because if the unknown fleet was real, then this wasn't just an academy story. This was the opening scene. And Rena Vale was not the side character. The final moment that night came when Captain Rowe walked into the mess hall. He didn't stride like usual. He didn't radiate control. He looked careful. He approached Rena's table, stopping a respectful distance away like he was aware she could topple him with a finger. The entire hall went silent. Rena looked up. Fork paused. Captain Rowe's throat worked. Then he did it. He apologized. Cadet Rena Vale, he said, voice stiff. My actions today exceeded appropriate limits. I acted without discipline. Rena stared at him. Expression unreadable. Rowe forced the words out. I apologize. The mess hall held its breath. Rena blinked slowly. Then she said, okay, just, okay. Rowe looked like he wanted to scream. Instead, he nodded once and walked away. As soon as he left, the room erupted into whispers and stunned laughter. Rena went back to eating like nothing had happened. I watched her, and I understood something that felt both thrilling and terrifying. In one day, she had done what most cadets spend years trying to do. She had shifted the balance. Not through politics. Not through threats. Through simple, undeniable proof. And tomorrow, every bully, every proud cadet, every instructor who believed in tradition above truth, would have to decide what to do with her. And beyond the academy, somewhere out in the dark between systems, something unknown was watching, testing, measuring, just like we were. Only difference, if the unknown fleet judged us unworthy, they wouldn't apologize. They would erase us. And the only reason we might survive was because a human girl named Rena Vale walked through our gate, said hi, and refused to kneel.